This meeting is being recorded.
Tonight we'll go back in time to seasons past, when 22 men graced the rugged fields of yesterday, fighting for one more first down, one more yard gain, one final score that would bring victory after 60 minutes of battle on the gridiron. Tonight we'll explore the world of Gridiron Greats. And welcome to Gridiron Greats Football History and its Memorabilia on the Sports History Network in conjunction with Swick Enterprises, and we're live from the Southport, North Carolina home of Gridiron Greats Magazine. I'm Bob Swick, publisher and editor of Gridiron Greats Magazine, and I'll be your host for the show. Gridiron Greats is the only publication in America that focuses upon the history and memorabilia of the North American football game since its inception in 1869. We cover 150 plus years of football history and memorabilia, and find us on the web at gridirongreatsmagazine.com. It is at this time I'd like to introduce my co-host. He's a senior contributing writer to Gridiron Greats Magazine, a football memorabilia historian specializing in pre-World War II items, in particular Red Grange, and also Seattle Seahawk items, in particular Steve Largent. He has, from Portland, Oregon, Mr. Joe Squires. Joe, welcome to the show today.
Outstanding. Great to be back. Great to be back. Blake will explain who Red Grange is a little later to you.
All right. Sounds good.
Thank you.
I want to touch upon briefly two things. First, a few comments on the National. I was kept informed of what was going on in the National in Cleveland this year. In a way, I'm real happy. I did not attend. The logistics just sounded scary to me, to say the least. And at the same time, it was very, what's a good way of presenting it? It was just a chaos on the show everywhere.
Yeah, I heard the same. I heard just loading, offloading, getting to the show, the hour-long line to the taxis, not to mention hotels, Wi-Fi, bathrooms, food. Yeah. God forbid if you were a dealer and you had to load and unload your wares to even set up at the show. Just all of it. Just no bueno.
Yeah, exactly. So next 3 years, it's back in Chicago and Rosemont. Again, the roll of the dice there with 100,000 plus people going to the show. But you do have a little more ability to get hotel rooms and get around a little better, restaurants and so on and so forth. So that is my comment on the National. I heard there was a ton of vintage football there, and several younger folks said they were looking for more modern stuff and modern football, which I found interesting. So we'll see what happens next year in Chicago. But backing up a bit, at this time, there was a big auction by Huggins and Scott. And I don't know if, Joe, you looked at it or you bid on anything, because there were some uncut sheets in there. But I was kind of surprised at a few prices and the way a few things rolled in that particular auction. Any thoughts or comments on that?
I did. There were a couple sheets I was watching. I will admit I was out of town on that when that fired off, but the prices seem to be strong. The economy's a little tough, but I mean, you can look at what's going on in Heritage right now. I mean, geez, there's a PSA 4 Nagurski that's what, in the 40,000 range. What is it? I'm sorry, I wasn't ready to review that. Let me look here.
It's incredible to see the Chickles are literally gold right now, and if they're great, the prices are just phenomenal on them. It's just I find it amazing to see what's going on with those Chickles there, as far as the increase, the run up in costs. I can't believe they're being collected like that, and or are they being speculated more than anything else? It's just amazing.
Yeah, beg your pardon. It was the PSA 4 Nagurski that was in the Huggins and Scott. It sold for 34 plus the VIG, which would put it a little over 40,000.
Right.
For a PSA 4. the butterfly version PSA 7, Joe Namath went. Oh my gosh! I mean, that went for 18,000 plus the 21,000 for a PSA 7. I mean,
Right.
that's what a PSA 8 usually goes for. There's not really a premium for the butterfly version, but in fact, I can, yeah, I consider a printer's defect, to be honest.
Yeah,
as
and
you
in good faith, I just can't put my name it's from 1965 into plastic. I don't think that's a good thing to do. I want to keep it free as long as I can. That kind of thing. And I've had a lot of people tell me I'm basically crazy not getting a lot of my stuff graded right now. And I said, well, I'm not ready to part with it yet. And at the same time, how I feel about graded stuff. So it'll be interesting to see.
Yep, a lot of chickles, a lot of wax, a lot of unopened in there. Yeah, it was a really, really good football centric one. A good. I really coined that as eBay-esque. There was a lot of mid-grade, PSA, 4, 5, 6,
Right.
chickles and leaf stuff. I mean, now I'm into page 2 where it's getting into some 1950 Bowman PSA 5 and 6. It's good. It's cool to see really good vintage football, but there's also some PSA 1 and 2, 1894 Mayo, cut plug, some advertisements, for Mayo that was really nice. It was good stuff. But anytime you get really good vintage football, it's really cool to see in Huggins. But yeah, some really good auctions coming up. Like as mentioned, Heritage has always. I think they constantly have a round of auctions ending every other week.
Right. And again, I think the timing of this Huggins and Scott auction with the National basically going on very quickly, and at the same time, I think they were probably trying to time it before the Pro Football Hall of Fame festivities. That's a lot for a football collector to handle, especially National coming up, because you know how it is. A lot of guys who are vintage football collectors, they're waiting for their once a year shot at the National to try to pick up something they're never going to see on eBay, never going to see at a show, small local show, so on and so forth. So they're going to spend their money basically at the at the National rather than that type of auction. So be interesting to see what happens again, over the next 12 months before we go to the next National, what actually comes to play in different auctions and what goes out and it could be found on eBay or any other type of auction site at the same time.
I agree, Bob. I thought it was kind of professional courtesy that didn't end at major auctions during the Natty, but I guess not. Don't tell Jeff Payne, by the way, our fearless leader, but a program from a Red Grange program from Thanksgiving Day, 1925. Red Grange's first ever NFL game, his debut with the Chicago Bears against the Cardinals. Thanksgiving Day, 1925. That program is for sale in this upcoming Heritage. Current bid, $1,750. This should be it's a full program in really good shape, no stains or anything.
Right.
It should be a $4,000 or $5,000 program. It ends
easily.
in 19 days. I don't like outing auctions, but I know that's one of Jeff's white whales. So Jeff,
I'll be happy you mentioned it, and the crowds that are listening who'll be watching this podcast later on, they'll be jumping on it. So we'll see what happens.
Also in that auction, I will out one that I'm watching is a 1927 program, Red Grange's New York Yankees, November 11th, Veterans Day, November 11th, 1927. Red Grange's New York Yankees against the Pottsville Maroons.
Yeah.
Which is why I gave the nod to this shirt today. So
that's a good idea. You tipped it off for yourself now as far as going after that one. So
yeah,
that's good.
Yeah, some really cool stuff. Heritage always gets it, and I don't usually watch game worn stuff, but there's a Jerry Rice game worn jersey in there, and I'm watching a couple things, just for you. And there are 1975 Jerry Kramer
Yeah.
Green Bay Packer Hall of Fame presentation ring from the Jerry Kramer collection. You don't see personal effects like that come up very often. In 1982,
He's putting some of his stuff out. I don't know, but again, it is what it is. I mean, I've seen so many guys, sell their stuff while they're alive. I've seen so many asked, and then the family's trying to figure out what to do with it. I literally a couple times a year I get emails or phone calls or whatever. What do I do with the collection, so on and so forth. I get it. I mean, I understand it. You can't take it with you. If you want to, want to see where you want control of what you want to do with your collection and with your memorabilia, especially as an ex-player, that's what you got to do. You got to have the plan on it, and that's it. All right, I'm going to move along today and introduce our special guest.
Yes.
Our special guest played football at the College of Worcester, where he was a two-time All-American, and he played from 1980 to 1983 with the Cincinnati Bengals, and then he went to the Green Bay Packers for the 1984 and 85 seasons. He played under head coach Forrest Gregg during his career, and he went to the Super Bowl 1981 with the Bengals. He's currently the president and CEO of Touchstone Investments of Cincinnati, Ohio. And I'd like to welcome to our show this evening, Mr. E. Blakemore. Blake, thanks for being on.
Blake, did we lose you?
Bob, no, I'm here. Bob and Joe, it's great to be on. Thanks for having me, and look forward to talking with you today.
Blake, thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule for coming on. I'm very honored. And as you know, I'm a big Packer fan, Packer shareholder. So this is a great day.
I'm a shareholder. Yeah, I'm a shareholder as well, and I love the fact that you all dig into the legacy of the game so much. I'll share with you that my own football legacy goes back quite a ways as well. My great-grandfather played on the first College of Worcester football team in 1889.
Right.
Wow.
Wow.
I'm not sure he was a Gridiron Great, but he was one of the first. And they were 2-0 that year, and they beat Denison twice.
Wow. Incredible. Well, before we get started, I just want to show our audience a couple pieces of memorabilia. The first one is the 1984 media guide of the Packers with Forrest Gregg on it. And as I said before, and Joe knows this, our director of art and illustration of the magazine Gridiron Greats, Jared Krause, is good friends with the Gregg family, and he spent many a Sunday afternoon talking football with Forrest while they were watching games out there in Colorado. And we got a couple interviews with Forrest over the years in the magazine, which was great. And then the second piece, the 1985 media guide, which Blake, I know I sent to you. Your little blurb in the media guide there, which try to see a little better there. But anyways,
that was fun to see.
I thought you would enjoy it. I'm sure you have it, so on and so forth. Yeah. So let's get right down to the nitty gritty here. What made you decide, and what got you started playing football? Yeah, you have a great story to tell.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny. I grew up in the Southeast in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and mostly in the 60s. I was born in 58. So as a kid in the 60s, growing up in elementary school and high school, junior high and high school, there was football, and then there was all the other sports. So, if you were a young boy and you were growing up in that time, in that place, football was the sport that everybody wanted to play, and you wanted to be a football player. And so that's what I did. It was my first thing I loved to do from a sports standpoint, although I played a lot of different things when I was a kid. And then just kept playing. It's funny, I didn't play tackle football until I was in 7th grade because when I was playing, they didn't have a youth tackle football league. It was all flag football. So didn't put the pads on until 7th grade. I can distinctly remember my first day putting on the pads that I got the thigh pads in backwards, and that could have led to some really painful injuries. But somehow managed to survive my first day in pads, and then the rest, I guess, is a little bit of history, at least for me.
Wow. Unbelievable.
We had, yeah, it was fun. I played at a very good high school program, Baylor High School in Chattanooga. We ran the triple option back in those days. So you would fake one pass a game and run the ball the rest of the time. And it was being an offensive lineman, and I was a center going all the way back to basically 8th grade. Being an offensive lineman was great, right? Because all you did was run the ball, and we'd run it all over the place, run that triple option all day long. Had a great time, a lot of fun.
Wow.
Yeah, and then I decided to go to the College of Worcester. I didn't expect to do anything from a career standpoint playing football. I wanted to go get a good education. My dad encouraged me to go to a good small college. Happened to choose Worcester, which is, as I mentioned earlier, been in the family. I was 4th generation at Worcester. My great grandfather there in 1889, and the recruiting story at a small college is a little bit different than at the big schools. I got some letters from some of the big schools when I was a junior in high school, from Vanderbilt and Tennessee and Auburn, and I basically ignored them because I was committed to going to a small school. People asked me how I was recruited to go to the College of Worcester. I said, well, I sent in the application form, and then sometime in the spring before my freshman year, I got a postcard in the mail from the coaching staff, and it was a one question postcard I was supposed to fill out. It said, "Do you plan to play Fighting Scott football? Yes or no?" And I checked yes. I sent it back in, and then I'll never forget, I was sitting in the office of my offensive line coach a few years later. We got to be very close, obviously, after working together for a few years, and I was relaying that story to him, and he looked at me and said, "Yeah, you are our hottest recruit that year."
Oh, that's funny.
Wow.
That was recruiting at the D3 level in the 70s.
That's funny.
So,
Well,
funny.
I had a similar, even though I didn't play in college, but I went to a small college in Connecticut, Southern Connecticut State College, and they practiced on a stone-laden practice field, and I covered football for the school paper back then. And man, oh man, you really have to love football to play for them, and with some of the experiences there. So I could really see you play at a school like that, and the experience you had is just incredible. And then there to go to professional football just is just shocking in a way, but then it isn't, because you were really a focused player, to say the least, both in college and when you got out of college. I mean, it was incredible. And I'm going to forward a little here because I want to fill in everyone. Joe's going to talk a little bit about this. Is your book you wrote about your experiences, which is just, it was just an amazing book to read. It's one of those deals, again, I picked it up and I read it cover to cover in one night. And what a story you have in your career, from high school, college, and through professional football in your lifetime. It's just amazing. But again, backing up just to get a little off script here, College of Worcester, Division III. I always liked Division III football because I always felt guys who played there wanted to play football. That's what they're there for. They're not there pretty much on scholarship. They're not there because they're going to play in the NFL or whatever. They like playing football. And I always felt that the quality of Division III football is very good, and the quality of Division II football is very good at the same time. So
I would agree with you 100%. If you play D3 football, you're there because you love it, not because you're on scholarship or getting your schooling paid for. And so you're truly out there and committed to the game because you want to be there and practice and go through those 2-a-days in August, that we all go through because you love the game. Because a lot of your classmates are just going around having fun during college, and you're committed to something that's going to take a lot of time, energy, and effort to play. I look back on those 4 years, and that was the other great thing about D3, right? There's no red shirt. You're either playing or you're not.
Yeah.
I look back on those 4 years about as fondly as I could of any time in my life, not just playing football, but the friends I met there. Of course, I met my wife when I was 18 years old, freshman in college, and we just celebrated our 43rd anniversary. So that's worked out pretty well too.
Yeah.
But it was just a great experience. You know, I always remember my first game. I was a freshman. You know, I'm 18 years old, and the coaching staff had decided I was going to be the starting center. And our first game was an away game, and we loaded up the bus. The Fighting Scott bus, by the way, at that time had 250,000 miles on it.
Yeah.
And by virtue of my starting status, I got to ride in one of the equipment vans and have a better seat. But we drove 6 hours from the College of Worcester to play Canisius College in upstate New York on you talk about the fields you play on. We played on a high school field in the middle of a rainstorm.
Wow.
And the mud and the puddles, and it was just it was a sloppy mess. Won the game, got back in the bus and the vans, and arrived back on the College of Worcester campus at about 4 a.m. or something like that after the game. That was the glitzy life of a D3 football player. I found out early on.
Wow. And to me, those stories need to be told much more, because a lot of guys today have no clue. I mean, they're high schools, for crying out loud. They're using coach buses rather than school buses to get to a game. You know what I mean? It's just amazing. Just amazing how things have changed since our time in the 70s when we went to college and what we saw there. Amazing.
I can smell what that old 250,000 mile bus smells like.
Oh,
Yeah.
Please don't say anything about that. Yeah, we don't need to hear. Yeah.
Well, you had the privilege as the captain, as Bob mentioned earlier, you had the privilege of playing for a lot of people, but you played for head coach Forrest Gregg, with the Packers, as and as Bob mentioned, Jared Krause has who's a dear friend. Jared and I text a lot offline. Jared's a dear friend of his. I hold Forrest Gregg in high regard. I remember a quote from Vince Lombardi, saying he was one of the smartest players he ever had the privilege of coaching, and he played on the offensive line. So did you. I mean, that had to be a really good connection, to be coached by a Hall of Famer in the same, area you did. I mean, tell us what that was like.
Well, I'll tell you a couple things about that. First, Forrest obviously changed my life because he gave a kid from the D3 College of Worcester a fair shot, right? And that was one of the things that Forrest was known for. He didn't care where you were drafted. He didn't care, how much you were making, whether you're a rookie or a fourth-year player. It was what you were going to do on the field, the kind of commitment you showed, the discipline you had to play the game the way he thought it should be played. And so he and I, at least we had a similar approach to the game when it came to the hard work and the commitment required and the discipline required to play in the NFL. And I'll always respect him for the shot he gave me to make the team. I'll tell you a funny story about that. Because there are no guaranteed contracts or money or anything back then in the day. And I had signed the rookie minimum contract, and I had lined everything up, because if football didn't work out, I was going to go to law school. And I had already been accepted to Duke Law School, and actually had been assigned to a class and a roommate. And we get pretty deep into training camp, and we've gone through a few cuts. And I finally screwed up the courage to go down, and my deadline was coming up as to whether I was going to go to law school or play football, and I didn't know if I was going to make the team. So I finally screwed up the courage to go down and meet with Forrest Gregg. He's a pretty intimidating guy.
Yeah, big boy.
In his office up in Wilmington, Ohio, where he had training camp. I said, "So Forrest, or Coach Gregg," I said, I got this law school thing, and I'm trying to figure out, what I should do." And he didn't make any commitments to me. He just looked at me with those eyes of his, which would drill right through you, and said, "You're really doing a good job. You should stick it out and give it your best shot, and we'll see what happens." And sure enough, things worked out it turned out to be 6 years, and I put off the law school gig until after I was done playing for Forrest for all 6 years of my career. So yeah, he was, and then from the offensive line, as a Hall of Fame offensive lineman himself, while he was the head coach, you can be assured that the offensive line group every day got a little special attention from Forrest Gregg. He couldn't help himself. He would wander over to the offensive line drills and make sure that things were proceeding accordingly. Occasionally he'd step on the two-man sled and take a ride around the field with a couple of us grunting and groaning and pushing him around the field. He'd have a big grin on his face. And then he loved to see the defensive line and the offensive linemen mixing it up during full contact drills. Because remember, again, in those days in the 80s in training camp, we were in full pads, 2-a-days, full contact. The only thing we didn't do to each other was cut block. Everything else was full contact, and we didn't hit the quarterbacks. But everything else was full contact, full go. And you can imagine how heated things could get in some of those hot August practices up in Wilmington, Ohio. It was pretty intense. And then, of course, his famous drill, I think it'd be illegal today, his famous drill that he brought to the Bengals, along with the hard-nosed attitude that was so important to him and our success, was and I wrote about this in my book, he called it the nutcracker, where towards the end of training camp, after you've been beating each other up for, literally 3 or 4 weeks, one of the last things we would do before we broke camp was the nutcracker drill, where he'd line up a couple of tackling dummies about 3 or 4 yards apart, and then he'd assign, everybody would be assigned, I would be assigned a defensive lineman or a linebacker, and it was basically one-on-one in between the dummies, and a running back would try to run through the block and through the defensive guy. And it was called the nutcracker for a reason, because you can imagine the kind of contact that was going on in that trench. And the whole team would be gathered around cheering and screaming for the defensive guy or the offensive guy. And it was about one of the most intense things you could go through as a player. And he did a lot of character judging during that drill, I can assure you. Yeah, there were some guys that were pretty good athletes, but didn't have the, let's just call it the intestinal fortitude to show well during that drill. And that told him a lot about the player.
And the big thing about a drill like that is also that after you're done with the drill, there's no hard feelings. You're going to have a beer with the guy at night or whatever type of thing, because he is your team. That's
right. That's right.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Well, and then the other thing Forrest did, when I was let go by the Bengals, so he left for Green Bay after the '83 season, and then I was let go by the incoming coach Sam Weich in '84, and Forrest was immediately in touch with me, and I flew up and met with them up there, and eventually he signed me about 3 games into the season, which was just great. My experience, I obviously. Bengals experience was great because we went to the Super Bowl and had a lot of success there. It was my first team, but I'll never forget having the the privilege to play in Green Bay at Lambeau Field and that crowd and the fans.
Yeah.
It was, you cannot, if you haven't done it, it's almost indescribable what it's like to play at Lambeau.
Yeah, it is. It is indescribable to just the whole experience of Green Bay is just it's magical to me. It's just truly magical. I love going there. I love watching a game. I I would love just to spend a season there and go to every game and just hang out for 4 months while they're playing.
I can't even imagine the reception that somebody like Forrest Gregg would get going back, to basically Mecca, Lambeau.
Well, yeah, that's a good point, Joe. And you have to think about this now. When Forrest went up there, he was replacing another legend, right? Because Bart Starr was the guy that had been at the helm for years and years, and so that was a bit dicey because Bart obviously had his fans, but the team needed a change, needed a new attitude, needed a new approach, and Forrest was the guy for that.
Yeah.
And so I was glad to be a part of that for a couple of years. Very small world story. I'll go off script a little bit myself, but so my wife and I, when we were there, we had 2 kids. Our youngest was our son, and he was still, very small. My wife would stroller him around the neighborhood, and then he's 40 years old now. But the woman that he ended up marrying actually was from Green Bay, and her family still lived in Green Bay when they got married. So when they had their wedding, my wife arranged to get a couple of the luxury boxes. Of course, they've improved Lambeau a bit. They have luxury suites now, and we hosted the entire rehearsal dinner over at the stadium. And did tours around Lambeau and took everybody around it. People just loved it. They couldn't get enough of it, just the whole experience of being there. But think of the irony of, my son being strolled around the Green Bay neighborhood, and then some 30 plus years later, he's getting married there. That was not irony, wonderful coincidence, I would call it. Yeah.
That's a great story. That's great. Blake, can you spend a little time, again, talking about your book? Again, great book. What prompted you to write it, so on and so forth? It's called True.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Yeah, thanks. It's funny, as I told my story off and on over the years to people, they would find parts of it fascinating. Sometimes they'd look at me and say, "Gee, you should write a book," and I just laugh. Everybody says that, right? Then I'm up in my work career took me up to Canada. I spent over 3 years living and working in Toronto and all over Canada, which was a great experience. But they have some pretty long, cold winters up there, and so I said, you know what? If I'm going to sit down and start writing this thing, because I thought about it from time to time, now would be a good time to do it. Plenty of long, gray, cold days in the basement there to spend some time. And so I just literally picked up a pen and started writing, handwriting, the whole draft myself, and editing and fact checking myself. Because it's funny, when you go back and start writing about things that happened 30 years ago, you remember one thing, then you go look up something on Google, and it's, oh wait, it was a little bit different than that. Had my daughter and my wife take a look at the draft before I was ready to publish, and then I ended up self-publishing. So basically wrote it myself. Took me about 2 years, more or less, to get it written and then published. And never expected it to be a bestseller, and don't worry, it hasn't been. But I really did it because I wanted to tell my story, and I've shared it with a number of people. People that have taken the time to read it seem to appreciate it for various reasons. But it was fun for me to go back and write some of those stories down from those years playing ball. It's such a unique experience, and it's one of those things I just never expected growing up, right? That I'd be playing in the NFL and having those experiences. And I look back on it today as I'm sitting here in my office in Cincinnati, and the stadium's about a mile down from me. It's still hard for me to believe that I would actually go out there on Sunday afternoons and play ball with these guys.
Wow!
So a lot of fun. It's fun to write, and enjoyed doing it.
It was such a story from the heart, and you and I are actually the same age, believe it or not, and so I remember
we're that young, are we, Bob?
Yeah.
we we shared, a lot of the history of the time, so on and so forth. And to me, I've always evolved in football, even though I'm a dinosaur in football. I still like the old days of football compared to today's game. But at the same time, I could see a lot of parallels, especially the college years, what you had mentioned in Division III, small school, so on and so forth. And I always remembered our coach at Southern Connecticut after a loss. I tried to avoid any sensitive questions whatsoever interviewing him because I knew he was ready to erupt at any second. So I didn't want to take his wrath. So I covered over a lot of stuff. But anyways, it was just a great story, and to see a guy from Division III college play professionally and in particular play for the Packers. Just made it even a greater story in my mind. So it's really a great book. I really enjoyed reading it.
Appreciate that. Thank you. It was fun to do. When I got to know the Bengals, the other legend, I mean, talk about a gridiron great that I had the fortune to meet and get to know a little bit was Paul Brown. Who, of course, was the owner and the general manager of the Bengals from its inception for so many years. I know his son is the general manager now, and Mike and I still know one another, of course. But Paul, when my sports information director at the College of Worcester decided that my college career wouldn't be the last of it for me, he thought I might have a shot in the NFL. He decided to take me down to meet Paul Brown. Now, how would the sports information director at the College of Worcester be able to go meet Paul Brown or talk to Paul Brown? Well, this guy was writing about high school football back in the 50s and I guess 50s and 60s when Paul Brown was at Massillon High School.
Yep.
Covering Massillon, and got to know Paul then and got to actually be good friends with him. And while he was with the Cleveland Browns, and then of course when he moved down and started the Cincinnati franchise. And so my friend Ernie Infield, and that was his actual name, sports writer named Infield, perfect, he just one day said, okay, and this was in the summer after my junior year, we're gonna go down to the Bengals training camp and you're gonna meet Paul Brown. And I said, okay, let's go. And sure enough, we're down there. And Ernie, by personal invitation to Paul Brown, had the run of the entire camp. He interviewed any player he wanted to see. He introduced me to Paul Brown, and Paul took me over to the sideline while practice was going on, and stopped practice at one point and introduced me to their starting center, Blair Bush, who was quite an accomplished NFL center for many, many years. And I'll just never forget that. And then as a result of that meeting, that one-off meeting, that's how I ended up getting scouted by the Bengals and then ultimately a few other NFL teams. And then ultimately they offered me a free agent contract after the 1980 draft was over. And just so you know, free agent, that's after 12 rounds of the draft. So they were literally just stocking their team with players they needed for training camp. No expectation that I would make the team. Signed a rookie contract, which your audience would get a kick out of hearing this. My rookie contract was $25,000. That was if I made the team and played the whole year. And I got a $2,500 signing bonus and another $2,500 if I made the team after training camp. So my total first year contract earnings were $30,000 as a rookie for the Cincinnati Bengals in 1980.
But
contrast that to today's. It's just a little bit different today, right?
But in today's money, that's like $55,000, Blake.
Well, I think I've done the math. I'm in the finance business, so I've actually done the math. It's like 75 or 80 grand.
Yeah.
So, not bad for your first job out of college.
That surprises me. You fell through the draft that low. You were a two-time All-American, weren't you? I mean,
yeah, but again, D3.
Yeah.
Nobody drafts at then. Nobody. And remember, nobody draft D3 players back then. But remember who our starting quarterback was for the Bengals for many, many years, and while I played too, Ken Anderson.
Right.
D3, D3, Tiny
Yeah.
Augustana over in Illinois or Indiana. Yeah. And that was the other unique thing about that Bengals team. If you look at the player roster, it was and this was a Paul Brown
Yes.
trademark signature, very unusual roster. We had, so I was D3, Ken Anderson D3. We had a receiver from Lehigh. We had a linebacker from Dartmouth. We had a running back from Yale. We had a punter from Harvard. It was a pretty eclectic mix of people, and Paul Brown was he didn't just go with everybody else's first choice for a player. He looked a little deeper and found some hidden gems. It's fun to be a part of all that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Blake, I had the privilege last year of I live in Oregon, and there's quite a few football players who live in Eastern Oregon, one of which is Dan Fouts. Well, Dan Fouts, Drew Bledsoe, but last year I had the privilege of being invited to a dinner through a charity I belong to called the Hall of Fame Dinner, and there were 5, Hall of Fame and Super Bowl players that were there, including Bledsoe, Dan Fouts, Gary Zimmerman, and we had a chance to ask some questions. And my question to them was, who was the best player you ever played against? Dan Fouts said Lawrence Taylor. He's like, the stuff he did to me on the playing field would be considered assault if he did it to me on the streets, and he would be thrown out of the league for it now. Drew Bledsoe said Reggie White, but he was so nice. Said he sacked me twice in a row in the Super Bowl and helped me up both times. So second question to you: who was O-line is not easy. You've got some talent stacked up against you on the other side. Who was the toughest player?
Yeah. So it's funny, before you get off Reggie White, I will mention that Reggie grew up and played high school ball about 20 miles from where I played my high school ball in Chattanooga, Tennessee. He went to Ooltewah High School. That was one of the teams we played when I was playing down there, but of course he was quite a bit younger than I was. What an amazing player. So yeah, it's timely you asked this question because, and I do get asked this question a fair amount, and it's a pretty quick response. During my years playing for the Packers, my 2 years playing for the Packers, of course, we played the Bears twice a year in our division rivalry. And that was, of course, 85 was the year of the Bears, right? When they went to the Super Bowl and won it with be what is probably the best defense of all time.
Yeah.
And so I had the privilege, the nightmares, the terror, the night sweats of playing against that defense basically 4 times in my time when I was at Green Bay. And the guy that would usually line up across from me in that defense was Dan Hampton.
Oh, my.
And that guy, they didn't nickname him Danimal for nothing. He was one of the biggest, strongest, quickest guys that I ever played against. And they would line him up right over. I was a center, and we had put up the shotgun snapped in, and that was my specialty when I was playing for the Packers. And he would line up right over my right arm, right where I have to snap the ball, and knew that he would have a split-second advantage when I was snapping the ball to get into me and get to the passer. And I just remember multiple times looking back after I'd snapped the ball at Lynn Dickey and just screaming, "Look out, because here he comes." That was all I could do. Wow. The guy was so – and I still have nightmares about
Hall of Famer
and playing Dan Hampton, quite a player.
I thought for sure you're going to –
Say what?
I thought for sure you're going to go with Mike Singletary, just that crazed eyeball that he would.
So that when they played their base defense with a 4-3 and Mike was in the middle and as a center, he was the guy I would be chasing all over the field. And I remember I would go out after him. He's not a very big guy, and I would go out after him. And I was 275. He was probably 230, 235, and I was ready to just level him with a block, and he'd be gone. He'd just be gone. and then I'd look around, he'd be making the tackle. He was so fast, and he was so smart about where the play was going to go. He was hard to block. But I tell you the thing, and I'll mention this week because it just happened. The thing that is really moving for me to see the Bears gather around their teammate Steve McMichael.
Yes.
Of course, I played against him in that great Bears defense as he was
Yes.
Inducted into the Hall of Fame last week. Unable to speak because of the ALS that he's going through, but to see his teammates around him and see his daughter accept on his behalf, it was just really, really special to see from that era. See those players get recognized. Yeah.
And that's lead into, again, our director of art and illustration has done a lot of work with the McMichael family. He was at the presentation in Canton, and Jared sent a few things during the through the ceremonies, and he filled me in on what they were going to do beforehand. And I said, I'm glad the Hall of Fame and NFL actually went out to the house to present him, his jacket and his bust. That's needed. Sadly, to see the condition he was in, it's just to me so sad. And but at least he got maybe some closure by getting into the Hall of Fame finally and having the ceremony, so on and so forth. So
I'm sure. Yeah.
It
was great to see, and I'm sure he was smiling inside. He had to be. Exactly.
Unbelievable. Yeah. Well, Blake, we're almost out of time. Any final thoughts? And we're doing this a little differently because we have a lot of collectors on our show. But what advice could you give a young man, let's say in middle school or high school, playing football, and cut through all the layers? What advice could you give him to try to continue his career through college and possibly professional ball?
And by the way, Blake, I have a son who's a sophomore in high school who is doing two-a-days right now, and he's an offensive guard. So he was very curious about today's show when I was telling him about it yesterday after I picked him up after a 3-hour, his second 3-hour one, listening in sweat.
I know those. I don't miss those days. So I'll sum it up in three quick things. One is you got to love it, meaning you better damn well love what you're doing if you want to be successful in football, because it's not for the faint of heart or not for people who just kind of think, I'll do this for a while and give it a try. No, you got to love it. Second is you got to want it, and that's very different from the first, because wanting it means you're willing to put in the energy, sweat, the tears, the blood, the pain to be successful. And it's very, very, you might love something, but do you really want it bad enough to make it happen? And then the third, and it's a bit more practical advice, I got to tell a little story before I give you the third. I worked one summer in college, I worked in an oil pipe yard under the blazing sun, lifting steel pipe, 20, 30 foot steel oil pipe, and loading it and stacking it on trucks and off trucks. And you climb all over the pipe during that summer job. And we had a foreman out there, and if you weren't careful, you get on that pipe and it would start rolling, and it could roll right up your ankle and your leg. And, sometimes you could get hurt pretty bad doing that. And I remember I was on a pile one time and it started rolling, and I jumped off just in time to save myself. And the foreman looked at me, didn't crack a smile, and he said, "Blake, you got to be smarter than the pipe." So my third thing for people is if you're going to be committed to this thing, you got to be smarter than the pipe, and that means you got to be smart enough to do the right things at the right time and not make bad decisions that are going to have implications for the goals you're trying to achieve. So important, especially when you're a teenager and in college, to make those decisions that are going to stand the test of time and not make decisions that are going to close down options for you. How's that? You got to want it, got to love it, got to be smarter than the pipe.
That's great advice. That's so true in life. That really is. And, again, for football, you got to love the game. And I always called it a 60-minute chess match. among 22 guys, and you also have to be part of a team. You can't be an individual in the game. And to me, that's what makes football great. And Blake,
Yeah.
I truly appreciate you taking time out. I got to throw out a thanks to one of my former students who's an employee of yours, who was able to engineer this meeting. Mary, if
Mary,
when you watch this, thank you. I appreciate it.
Mary, yeah, I thank her too, because I get to work with her every day, and she's fabulous. Yeah, Mary Mock, shout out.
Yeah, and she was a great student of mine. I appreciated it, and it's amazing over the years. I've taught for 42 years now. I thought this is probably my best occasion. I used to teach one semester a pitcher for the former Colorado Rockies who threw a no-hitter for them, Humberto Jimenez. And long story short, I was trying to figure out, I know this guy from somewhere. I can't figure out where it is. And I emailed them, and I said, because I teach online, and I said, I emailed them, are you so-and-so? And I said, yeah, I'm the pitcher. And I'm like, holy mackerel, I'm teaching a guy who threw a no-hitter in major. So now I can say I have a connection to the Packers, finally, after all these years, of somebody who actually played for him and lived through it. And it is, I can tell you got Green Bay in your DNA there after your experience.
Oh yeah, I'm a cheesehead, no question.
That's great.
Your
All right.
profile touchstone looks really good, by the way, Blake.
What's that?
Your profile, your profile.
Thank you. Yeah.
And on touchstone looks very good.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah.
It's great. It's a great place to work.
I know you're busy. Thanks for being on, and we'll be in touch. Thank you.
I enjoyed it, both of you. Thanks a lot.
Okay.
Thanks for your time.
Take care.
Take care. E. Blake Moore, formerly of the Cincinnati Bengals and the Green Bay Packers. Great story, great book. I highly recommend if you can still pick up the book online, so on and so forth, and I recommend reading it. Joe, we got a few minutes here, and just to give some background on today's show, I live in Southport, North Carolina, and I'm living right now through Tropical Storm Debbie while we're recording as we speak, and the influx of water and wind we are getting over here. So I'm kind of got it knocked out in time, and I'll get this up posted over the next few hours before we get the real bad weather, I guess. That's going to be coming. But Joe,
I knew that was touching down on the East Coast. I didn't even think about that affecting you as it was skirting along, but I guess that has, it impacts out several miles. So yeah.
Yeah. So it's a strange storm the way it's, basically making a swirl all around the Carolinas. So we're about an hour and a half outside of Myrtle Beach here, but we're right on the water, although I'm inland from the water. Next to a little town called Oak Island, and they're saying that their storm surges are going to be phenomenal over there over the next couple of days. So, but we're in basically a development here, which was built based on having issues with hurricanes and so on and so forth. So I'm not overly concerned, and we're kind of set away. But if I can't get out, I can't get out. It's no big deal. I got plenty to eat, plenty to do here. Not a problem. But thoughts on today's show? Handing off to you in our wrap up here.
What a classy guy! Thank you for sending his profile. When you booked him, what a great guest. Humble man. First of all, Harvard Law. After he left the NFL, went back to Harvard Law, and you heard him. You heard him talking about it. I'd worked in an oil field. Just the jobs that he worked his way through that he had. I really dug that. I mean, the guy worked his ass off. D3 college he went to. Free agent. Never knew if he was going to make it. Had a plan B. You can tell he worked his ass off. He was drafted, free agent, made the team. and then, when Forrest Gregg left Cincinnati and went to Green Bay, took him with him.
Yeah.
That's hard work. That's work ethic to be for Hall of Famer Forrest Gregg, probably, as Vince Lombardi said, one of the most intelligent players in that same position, to want to be poached and brought to his new team in his alma mater of Green Bay. That's saying something. That's saying you're pretty smart. And then to go on and get your JD at Harvard Law, and then to move into the finance arena where he's at. I mean, obviously Blake's a very successful, intelligent man, very humble. We didn't even touch on half the successes he's had.
Exactly. And that's the one thing that truly impressed me reading his book, and then getting some background from it, and getting filled in a little bit about him by my former student Mary there. It really, really impresses me. It's a great American story, great football story at the same time. It's a great success story. And then, we need a few more of those right now, in my opinion, especially when it comes to football. There's just so much, to a certain degree, there's a lot of negativity in football today, and we got to talk about the positive nature of the game. It's a chess match. It's an art. It's a pure game, and it's a game where men in the battle on the gridiron fight for that yard, fight for that score, fight to win. You want to win. That's what it's all about. And it has passionate fans. College football has passionate fans. High school football has passionate fans. USFL, WFL, arena football have passionate fans. It's a great sport to be a passionate fan in, because there's so much glamour, there's so much color, there's so much history to the game. It just makes it a great event, to say the least.
I had one more question for him. Did he have to go early or something like that? I thought we had a couple more minutes, so I had one fun question locked and loaded for him. But I don't know if you noticed in his NFL stats, he had 2 touchdowns in 77 games, which is a rarity for an offensive lineman, even an O-line or a center. How the hell did he get 2 touchdowns in 77 games?
The secret is in his book, and I'll send them an email, and I'm sure he'll send them for you and fill you in.
I wanted to ask
that in, but I wanted to push for his time frame too. So we got probably a couple hours on stuff, to say the least. All right, couple of points here. If you're not subscribed to Gridiron Greats Magazine, what are you waiting for? Check out our website, gridirongreatsmagazine.com. Our latest issue is just out. And if you haven't picked it up, it's available. We also have a PDF download on it.
Good.
Check it out.
I'm really enjoying the behind the table Spano. Just some good articles in the recent one. I really liked it. And I always look forward to your preface. I love hearing from just reading from the editor. I always enjoy just turning to the first page and just reading your thoughts.
Thank you.
So, I really enjoy that.
You're going to enjoy John's article in the fall issue, because John and I actually set up at a show in Columbia, South Carolina about a month ago. He came down Saturday. He lives off season during the summer down Pawleys Island in South Carolina. So he was able to drive over, and we spent a day together setting up. So he's got a lot of good observations. I had a lot of observations. It was interesting because I was set up right between two. One gentleman had only Pokemon stuff and whatever else, whatever they are. And the other guy on the other side of me had a lot of Pokemon, but he also had some sports stuff too. And it was an education for me of a lifetime, seeing what I saw.
I'm proud of you for keeping your temper, Captain.
I have to say, I was on very good behavior for the whole time. My good friend John Day, who's a good friend of Gridiron Greats Magazine, was set up across from me. John, who's a ball of fire, and he is very much into sports publications. We had a great time visiting and talking about things. John's one of the original subscribers to Gridiron Greats. He's a dealer in South Carolina. Big University of South Carolina sports historian also. Big football fan over there. Long story short, we had a nice time visiting, at the same time. So it was interesting. And one last comment on that. We're packing up on the show that Sunday. It was a 3-day show, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. It's about a 4.5 hour ride from here.
And I brought one thing for show and tell, by the way, Captain.
Oh, beautiful. Beautiful.
Thank you.
I love it. I love it. I'm
it's
packing up.
GAI, but it's the old flip number. So I took a gamble.
Wow. Unbelievable.
It's for display purposes only. So
Good. Good. Don't
sorry to interrupt.
So anyways, we're leaving on that Sunday. I'm packing up the car. It's 106 degrees outside. So I'm going outside. And if you could have seen me, I mean, the sweat is just like literally pouring down. And I finally got the car cooled down to like 92, and I had to get gas on the way home. And like Brenda came with me for the weekend, and she said, "Boy, this is hot." I said, "That's an understatement if there ever was." Yeah. I have not felt heat like that in a long time.
Wow.
We had a good time. Hey, we're completely out of time. Thanks for watching, and we'll be back hopefully next week. We're working on a few new guests for the show. Joe, thanks, and give my regards to the X-Man. I hope he's going to be all-state pretty soon. I'll have to now, gonna have to send me the high school he goes to. I'll have to put it on my news feed in the morning and check him out. All right, take care. Thanks for watching.